De-escalation becomes a goal, becomes extremely important. When one of our children does something wrong, at that point usually one of two things happen. They escalate in their behaviors and they deny. And it's because of their brain damage. And until you give them a chance to calm down, until they have a little bit of time, you can't get an honest conversation out of them anyway. So one of the parenting techniques is to just leave them alone for a little while. Have them go do something else for a little while. There's a kid in prison. He stole a pack of cigarettes at a convenience store. Well, he got caught. And when the owner confronted him with it, he escalated. So the owner called the police. Unfortunately, in this case, the police only sent 2 officers the first time. If they'd sent 4 in the beginning, it would have gotten over a lot faster. And by the time it was all over, the kid got a 4-year sentence in prison. It's no longer stealing a pack of cigarettes, it's assault to an officer, it's destruction of public property, and the charges just went on and on. De-escalation becomes important. Don't ever ask, did you do something? Because that doesn't work. They're going to deny, and then they're going to get upset. So one of the things that we do, for example, the other day, one of our sons wrote on the wall. And he came to me and said, "Oh, Dad, look, I found where somebody wrote on the wall, and they used the touch-up paint from the exercise machine." So I didn't say anything. I said, "Well, thank you." And I told my wife, and the next day we were in there and he came in, and she didn't ask, "Did you do it?" Because asking, "Did you do it?" is never the right response. At that point, they escalate and they deny. She asked, "Why did you do it?" Notify the police that you have a child at risk. Teach the police about de-escalation. There's a story out in Washington about a family whose son has learned how to hotwire a Toyota. So they sent him to the store to get a loaf of bread, and he comes back with a loaf of bread and a Toyota. Well, the police have learned that when they're missing a Toyota, they always go and check his house out first. He always just parks it right out front. He doesn't try to hide it or anything. But they realize what's going on. Last told, he had stolen 36 Toyotas. Protecting them. They need protection from the society, and also the society needs protection from them. And as they get older, this becomes not only more important, but it becomes more difficult. They need more external control. They need more structure. You have to become, as one national speaker said, you have to become a control freak. And in this you can't win. Your parents, your friends, everybody will say, "Well, you're too hard on them. If you just lighten up, everything would be okay." The school will say, "You're too hard on them." Yet, if you don't have a lot of control, and then when they blow it, the same people say, "Well, if you just had more control." But you do have to have more control. And if it doesn't feel right for them to do something, you shouldn't let them do it. Often you say, "Well, I knew they were going to get in trouble if I let them do this, yet I let them do it anyway." They need a lot of structure. In our home, we use 3 techniques the most. One is home base, one is the bucket, and the other is scheduling. Home base is a table where the kids come to. Whenever they're through doing something else, they come back to the home base. They come back to the table. At the table, they can play games, they can play with toys, they can also get permission to do something else. But they have to ask specifically what it is. They wouldn't say, "Can I go outside and play?" It's what they want to do when they're outside and what area they're going to play in. One of the good things that comes out of this, it helps them think about what it is. Therefore, it keeps them from just impulsively going through their day. It helps give them that structure. Another one is the bucket. The bucket's a 5-gallon bucket, and we use a 5-gallon bucket because it's mobile. If you have a kid who's really blowing it a lot, then you need to have them close to you. So they can sit next to you, and then when you change from place to place, whatever you're doing, they bring the bucket right along with them. And then they sit on the bucket. Another thing is scheduling. We have a lot of scheduling in our house. Our kids, we really try to schedule their day pretty fully. And that includes some playtime. But there's a lot of scheduling, and this helps keep them under control. It gives them that self-control. Recently, someone was in our home and they had a meal with us, and later we were talking, and he said, "You know, I'm really surprised on how well everything went." And then he said, "I bet that's because of the structure." And it is. So they need a lot of structure. As our children are getting older, they appear to be getting worse, but they're not actually getting worse. It's just that the gap is getting wider between where they should be developmentally and where they are. We're locking more and more things up. And we lock them up to protect them. It's to keep them from getting into trouble. Their bodies are bigger. They tear more things up. Remember one day I came home and I went into the bathroom and there was this pink washcloth laying on the floor. Well, we don't have pink washcloths, and so I picked it up and it was blue around the edges. So I went in and I asked one of my daughters, "Tell me what happened. Do you know what this is?" And she said, "Oh, that's calamine lotion." One of the other girls had a really bad mosquito bite that was bothering her, and so she asked that daughter, "What does Mom do for bad mosquito bites?" She said, "Well, she puts calamine lotion." So they went in and got the calamine lotion, and there was only about a half a bottle there. Fortunately, they poured the entire thing onto a washcloth, dabbed her arm with it, and then threw the washcloth onto the floor. And it's not like they do these things on purpose. It's just developmentally, see, they're bigger and they're going to work on solving these problems themselves. So now we lock up all medical supplies. We just have to do that. You see, if they can't deal with 6-year-old issues, how are they going to deal with teenage issues? How are they going to deal with adult issues? That's why they have to have more structure. That's why you have to protect them even more. And that's why you're going to have to, when they reach about 14 years old, work on a life plan for them. You need to teach them to trust the people that you say for them to trust. And you need to understand that just because they understand the words and can even repeat the words back to you, it doesn't mean they necessarily understand what those words mean. For example, it's a typical story. You tell the child, "Don't speak to strangers." Well, you go to a park and your child appears with Jane and they introduce you and you say, "Well, now what's the rule?" And they say, "Well, you're not supposed to talk to strangers." But this isn't a stranger. Her name is Jane. So don't think that just because they understand your words that they necessarily understand the meaning. This causes a lot of problems. So work harder at protecting them. You need to teach them about FASD. And 3 of the areas that you really need to teach them about is friendship, the percentages, and sexuality. You can use these notes to teach them from. You need to teach them that friends are people who help you move towards your life goals. Friends are not people who get you into trouble, who get you to sneak, who get you to do things that you know are wrong. Friends help you. You need to teach them the percentages. The percentages, 90% have mental health issues, 81% need assisted living, 79% can't keep a job, 70% become victims of violence, 60% are dead or in prison by the age of 30. 60% are dead or in prison by the age of 30. 60% have disrupted school experiences. 60% get in trouble with the law over sexual issues. The other day I had a phone call from a lady, and her son is getting ready to graduate from high school, and what he wants to do is go down to the cities and take a class in massage therapy. I said, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. 60% get in legal troubles. You don't put a person who has those sort of percentages into that type of occupation. Recognize these percentages. We don't teach them to beat them over the head with them to make them feel bad, but to teach them how to avoid it, how to not become a statistic." Another thing to understand is the external brain theory. One of the national speakers came up with this theory. It said these children need an external brain. And we see it all the time. We have a son who washes dishes really well if you're standing there watching him. But if you turn around, if you go out of the room, he's really liable to take a pan that had oatmeal cooked in it and put it straight down with the clean dishes. After all, the goal is to get the dishes off the counter, isn't it? So you need to understand they need help thinking, but we all need help thinking. I mean, that's what policemen do. That's what your husband or wife does. That's what your boss does. They help direct your thinking. So we all need external brains. It's just they need even more. Teach them to be their own external brain. That's one of our goals, is to have our kids be able to function without us constantly being there. We do that using structure and using home base. And both of these things help them become their own external brain. Another thing you need to understand is won't versus can't. Won't is a heart condition. It's defiance. Can't means they actually do not have the ability. And just because they have the ability one day doesn't mean they have it the next. A good example of can't is, because we have 13 kids, sometimes we stay up a little late and we make an agreement. Okay, we'll finish watching this video, but as soon as it's over, you have to go upstairs quietly so you don't wake up the baby. They honestly do not have the ability to do that. But if my wife or myself stand at the top of the stairs and keep going, shh, telling them to be quiet, then they can do it. And it's not that they do it out of defiance, it goes back to that impulsiveness. Another thing to understand is fair versus equal. In our home, we always try to be fair. We never strive to be equal. For example, we have a daughter who has a sensory overload problem. When she's around too much noise, when she's around too many colors, when she's too close to people, she always throws a fit. So when it comes time to line up, she either gets in the front of the line or she just comes in the kitchen and waits until everybody else has their food and we give her her food. Somebody says, well, that's not fair. She always gets in the front of the line. Well, it is fair, but it's not equal. Strive to be fair. Do not strive to be equal. Their compulsiveness, it's incredible. One time we were at some friends' home and they were having a party. It was after church and we were eating lunch there, and afterwards I was standing down on the dock talking to someone, and all of a sudden I noticed one of our sons came running out of the house, and he came running towards the dock. And I was just watching him, and all of a sudden I realized he's going to jump in the lake, and he doesn't know how to swim. So I immediately took out after him, and we had to pull him out of the lake. He would have drowned. He had this thought, I'm just gonna do it. And one night I was coming home from a meeting, and I had two of the kids with me, and all of a sudden my daughter said, Dad, he's in the back seat, and he's got the seatbelt around his neck, and he's choking. And so I pulled over, and I got out, and the son had put the seatbelt around his neck for no reason, the shoulder harness, and he kept ratcheting it down, and he had it ratchet down all the way, and he couldn't move. And I had to take a knife and cut it off. So I tell my kids, just because you have a thought doesn't mean that you should do it. And one of the problems is it becomes dangerous. Now, the other day, one of our sons he's loaded the dishwasher lots of times, and he started it lots of times. Well, he decided he'd run an experiment. He would put dishwashing soap in one of the cups, and he would put the hand soap in the other. And he wanted to see what that would do. Well, it created lots of bubbles, but it didn't create any problem. It took him a couple hours to clean it all out. But if he had mixed two chemicals together, that would have created possibly a dangerous gas. Household chemicals, it could have killed him. So impulsiveness is something you have to deal with. Remember, I said we lock more things up now than we ever have. Lack of self-control. With one of our child, sometimes I even use counting to 3. I hate counting to 3. My daddy taught me, when I tell you to do something, you do it. And he only told us one time. But with this child, if I count to 3, I give her the command, and then if I count to 3, it makes her stop and think long enough, gain enough self-control that she's able to do it. Another method I use is I hold a finger up, and that means for her to be quiet. And that sometimes helps her keep from throwing a fit. I went to a conference one time, and there was probably about a 24-year-old woman who got up to speak who had fetal alcohol effects. And when she spoke, I really listened, and I want to share with you what I learned from her. One of the things she said was that she ran away from home. She moved out when she was 16. She said she was having sex with anybody and everybody, and she didn't even like most of them. But she didn't know how to get out of it. She didn't know how not to have sex with them. They wanted to, and so she thought she should do it. She couldn't keep a job. She was drinking. She was doing drugs. She made a baby. She lost the baby to the system because she couldn't take care of it. Her parents would say, "Honey, come move home, back home with us." And she'd say, "No, I can take care of myself." And her adopted sister would say, "Why don't you come move in with me? I understand you not wanting to live with Mom and Dad. They're old fuddy-duddies, but why don't you move with me?" And she'd say, "No, I can do it. I can take care of myself." But she said it was so frustrating because she really couldn't. She couldn't take care of herself. Eventually, she did move in with her sister. She got a job, and everything went pretty well for quite a while until she started trying to take care of herself again, and then her whole life fell back apart. So I have this daughter, and as she's getting older, she's throwing more and more fits, and because she's confused, and she doesn't understand, and she tries to explain to you again and again and again, thinking that, well, if you just listen to her one more time, you'll get it. But it doesn't make any sense in the first point. That confusion, it runs very deep, and it creates a lot of pain and misery for them. Telling the truth is often a very difficult issue. And sometimes it's because that section of their brain has damage. My one son, my wife will say, I ask him a question and he answers it, and I think, and he looks at my face and he can tell by my face and my body language that I'm not believing it. And so he tries something else on, and he's just pulling it out of the air. He's the one that said one time, "Well, I didn't tell you the truth, Dad, because if I had, you wouldn't have believed me." So that's the reason he lied to me, because I wouldn't have believed him. And so then he told me another lie about how this thing had happened. He is confused. One time, same child, he was out playing. We had this big pile of dirt we were building on, and we had this big pile of dirt, and it was great for the kids to play in. We had a water pump there so they could pump water, and they could make ponds and lakes and tunnels and all this, and they were having a lot of fun in it. And one day I walked out, and I happened to notice the hand trowel he was digging in the dirt with, the tip of it was broken off. And so I said, "Hey, come here a minute. Is that broken?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did you break it?" And he said, "No, I was digging in the dirt, and I hit a rock, and the rock broke it." Well, see, in his mind, the rock broke it. He didn't do it. And so he wasn't lying to me. My daddy would have thought I was lying to him, that I said that I hadn't broke it, but he wasn't. Stealing is really a big problem. Matter of fact, we don't even call it stealing, we call it ownership problems, but it's stealing. One day I was talking to a mother, and she had taken her daughter, they'd gone to Target, and they got in, they separated, the mother went to do her thing, the daughter went to do her thing, and then they joined back together, and as they were leaving, the security guards came up and took them into the back room and searched, and there was a 2-year-old toy. The girl didn't want the toy. It was impulsiveness. She just did it, and there was no reason for it, but she got in trouble for stealing. In our home, we have a rule. You cannot keep anything you find. All found items have to be in, and that helps control the amount of stealing. All of our kids have a key to their own room. Each child has their own room, and each child has a key. And this helps also in this. We keep more things locked up now than we ever had, and this protects them. We've learned, do not set them up. I'm not soft on these issues, but I'm realistic. And it's very important to be realistic. Don't take an issue such as telling the truth and blow it out of proportion. Yes, I try to get the truth, But sometimes they really don't even know the truth. The truth is whatever they said twice. And oftentimes that still isn't the truth. So let's move forward in life, loving one another. Let's keep this in perspective.